For years, my wife Kathy and I lived in a whirlwind of constant activity. Work, house construction issues, and career ambitions kept us on edge, though we somehow found comfort in the chaos. Even our arguments, usually over small things like schedules or future plans, never really shook our relationship. I thought we were strong enough to handle anything life threw at us. But in hindsight, I now see the early signs of trouble. Small changes in behavior, unspoken tensions, and a growing emotional distance between us became more noticeable. Our conversations felt strained, our closeness less frequent, and I began to feel Kathy pulling away. I never imagined those minor issues would eventually lead to a painful revelation that would turn my world upside down. I woke suddenly, glancing at the clock. 2:30 a.m. My shirt was soaked with sweat, as it always was after that recurring dream. This time, I hadn't spoken out loud. Kathy was still asleep beside me. The dream always played out the same, a distorted memory from 2 years ago. In it, I'd sit at my desk with a bottle of whiskey, an empty glass, and a weapon. I'd down the drink without tasting it, check the revolver's loaded cylinder, and mutter threats of revenge. Thankfully, these dreams were becoming less frequent, now occurring only once every couple of months. Despite how vivid they felt, the dream had little to do with what actually happened. Yes, there was a bottle of scotch, but I was passed out on the sofa, and there was no weapon involved. To understand how things got to this point, I need to go back several years. 2002 was a tough year. It began with Kathy and me arguing with city inspectors over the design of our new house. After several permit rejections, we finally got approval in August, but dealing with our contractor was another battle. Meanwhile, we were both busy with our careers. I was working at Independent Investigations Corporation, a company that investigates insurance fraud. I was 30 years old and the lead investigator, able to choose my cases and assign others. The job was lucrative, and by then I was starting to notice a few gray hairs creeping in. People called me confident, but I wasn't anything special. Just a guy with a crooked nose from an old college boxing match, standing at 6 feet 2 inches and 185 pounds. Kathy, at 29, was the most attractive woman I knew. With her long, dark brown hair and striking blue-green eyes, she was slim and athletic, managing the accounting department at DCNH. Her company was doing well, and she'd been receiving nice bonuses. But early in 2002, there was a shakeup at her office when the Indianapolis manager was replaced by Greg Bartlett. That's when things started to change. Greg was about 5 feet 5 inches, overweight, and mostly bald, with just a ring of hair around his head. Kathy thought he was a good manager, and when I met him, I found him likable enough. Around the same time Greg came to Indianapolis, DCNH brought in a vice president, Jack Hansen from New York. Jack was about 45 in good shape, and seemed like the type who had a wandering eye. He struck me as the kind of guy who didn't let marriage stop him from pursuing women. Kathy, however, thought highly of him, and constantly talked about his great ideas for boosting business. By summer, our house was finally on schedule, and things at DCNH had settled down. Kathy said business was improving thanks to Hansen. We moved into our new home outside Indianapolis in August and loved it from the start. Jokingly, I told Kathy, "I want to make love in every room of the house." She took me by the hand and led me to the kitchen. "We'll start with the kitchen," she said. What followed was amazing sex, and although we didn't make it to the other rooms, we stayed close in the bedroom despite our busy schedules. Still, with work and settling into the new house, our moments were becoming limited to the bedroom at night. One night, I brought up starting a family. "I think it's time to get off the pill and have a baby," I said. "I want to wait," Kathy replied. "Jack suggested I hold off until next year since I'm in line for a promotion." "Jack?" I asked, a little irritated. "Yeah, Jack Hansen. He thought it'd be smarter to wait until after the promotion." "Why are you talking to him about our family plans?" I asked, annoyed. Kathy explained that he'd asked if we were planning kids, and she mentioned our timeline, prompting his suggestion to delay. Although I wasn't thrilled, I agreed to wait. By the end of the year, we were both swamped with work and not spending much time together. Weekends were supposed to be our time, but even those were getting eaten up by work. Kathy's department was busy trying to land a big merger, and I was juggling multiple investigations. On the last weekend of November, we finally had some time off together. We did our Christmas shopping, and over dinner, Kathy shared some good news. We're about to close a merger with National Pharmaceutical by December 20th, which means I should get my promotion. That's great, I said, excited for her. Then we can start trying for a baby. Not yet, she said. I'm still on the pill, and I want to settle into my new job before going on maternity leave. I understood, but I was still a bit disappointed. Trying to lighten the mood, I joked, should I buy stock in National Pharmaceutical? Absolutely not, she laughed. That's insider trading, and we'd go to jail. I'm kidding, I said. I'd never risk that. I know, she said softly. I'm just nervous because we're so close to sealing this deal, and I don't want anything to go wrong. December is company Christmas party season, and ours at IIC was on Friday, December 6th. It was a pretty tame event with about 43 people, including employees and their significant others. We had drinks, appetizers, dinner, and then some dancing. Since most of us are field investigators who don't work closely together, we didn't know each other well, which made the party low-key. I sat with my close friend Bill Ripley and his wife Susan. Kathy and I had a good time despite the quiet atmosphere. We stayed until midnight before heading home. Once home, I led Kathy to the bedroom, kissed her, and things quickly heated up. Kathy surprised me with some bold, new behavior, which took me off guard, but had an obvious effect. Afterward, she headed to the bathroom, teasing me about continuing our escapades in other rooms of the house. The next day, things shifted. I worked half the day, and when I got home, Kathy was staring out the window, lost in thought. She seemed upset and didn't respond to me at first. I decided to give her space and waited until after dinner to ask what was wrong. During dinner, Kathy cooked, and I cleaned up as per our usual arrangement. Once I finished, I sat with her in the family room and asked, "Kathy, what's bothering you? Can I help?" She finally opened up, saying there were problems with the National Pharmaceutical deal. The president, Mr. Benson, was making unreasonable demands, and if they didn't comply, the deal could fall through. Kathy was afraid this failure might cost her her job. I tried to reassure her, but she was adamant that if things went south, it would be on her. However, she couldn't share any more details because of confidentiality issues. She ended the conversation firmly, saying she had to handle it on her own. The next day, Kathy seemed even more distant. She barely spoke, and by Monday morning, she left for work early, claiming she had important meetings. After she left, I took out the trash, but when I emptied the wastebasket from our bathroom, something fell out and disappeared. After searching for it briefly, I gave up, finished taking out the trash, and moved on with my day. When I came back inside, I took another quick look around the kitchen for whatever had fallen from the wastebasket, but didn't find anything. I showered and got ready for work. By Monday evening, Kathy's mood hadn't improved, so I gently asked, "Are things better at work?" "I can't talk about it," she said, clearly stressed, "but I'll get through it." On Wednesday, Kathy seemed better. She greeted me with a kiss and said she loved me, something she hadn't done since Friday. Though she wasn't fully back to normal, the distant look was gone. "Can you tell me what's going on now?" I asked cautiously. "I'm not supposed to talk about it," she said, "but we've found a way to make Mr. Benson happy. Jack thinks it'll be okay now." Her tone was more relieved, though still tense. She didn't smile, so I knew she was still stressed, but I hoped things would settle soon. It bothered me that Kathy called Hanson Jack, while still referring to Greg Bartlett as Mr. Bartlett. I didn't understand the inconsistency. That night in bed, Kathy wanted me to hold her, but didn't want to make love. I could feel the strain her work was putting on us. After she fell asleep, I tossed and turned for 20 minutes, then went to the kitchen for a drink. While there, I noticed Kathy's briefcase on the chair. For the first time, I decided to look inside. It wasn't locked, so I opened it, but most of the papers didn't tell me anything. Then I found her day planner. Kathy had several meetings scheduled with Bartlett and Hanson, including one with Mr. Benson. I was confused about why she, in accounting, was meeting with a customer. Her planner also noted a strange numbering from December 6th to December 20th, with the 20th circled. I wasn't sure if it had to do with their Christmas party or the contract signing with Mr. Benson, but I knew the 20th was important. I put the planner back and returned the briefcase to its place. Over the next few days, Kathy's mood improved, but she remained distant. Using my skills as an investigator, I pieced together that December 20th was crucial. If Mr. Benson was going to sign the contract with DCNH, it would likely happen that day. On Friday, December 13th, I closed one of my 3 cases and was close to finishing another. That night, I met up with Bill Ripley for a beer to celebrate. After a couple of drinks, I mentioned the mystery in Kathy's day planner, without revealing it was hers. I explained the numbered days leading up to the 20th, which was circled and underlined. Bill couldn't help but suggested I ask Mary Farrell, one of our female investigators, for a different perspective. He was right. I needed a woman's insight. We dropped the topic, and later Bill joked that if I ever started my own agency, he'd want in. We laughed about it, and I told him he'd be the first person I'd call if it ever happened. That weekend was frustrating. Although Kathy was affectionate, we still didn't have sex, which was starting to bother me. Not just because of the lack of closeness, but because I didn't understand why. Monday morning, I told her I'd likely be working late all week to close my cases. "You can't work late Friday," she said. "You need to be home by 7 to get ready for the party." I agreed, though by midweek, I was growing frustrated and even a little angry. I closed my second case on Tuesday, and we went out to dinner to celebrate. But afterward, Kathy said she wasn't feeling well. So again, no sex. The same thing happened Wednesday night, and it was becoming harder for me to keep calm. I knew she was stressed, but I was reaching my limit. I convinced myself that by Friday, once the national pharmaceutical deal was settled, everything would get better, and we'd be back to normal. On Thursday, I was close to closing my last case, and told Kathy that I might struggle to be home by 7 o'clock. She was upset. "You promised," she said. "I know, and I'm sorry, but I'm so close to closing this," I explained, trying to calm her. I suggested she go to the party without me if I was late, and I'd meet her there by 9 o'clock. She reluctantly agreed, but didn't want to go alone. On Friday morning, I got a break in my case. I had been working to recover stolen jewelry, insured for over $1 million. The thief had offered to sell the jewelry back for $250,000, which would save the insurance company $750,000. I had finally gained the trust of the thief and set up a meeting to handle the exchange. After setting up the meeting, I went to the insurance office to get the money for the exchange. The paperwork for such a large amount takes time, but I had already identified the thief and followed him to a coffee shop on Friday morning. I called him to arrange the afternoon exchange, then tailed him to an old garage. He opened the trunk of a car, but left without taking anything, and after checking his surroundings, he left. Once he was gone, I broke the padlock with a tire iron, opened the trunk, and found the stolen jewelry inside a canvas bag. I left a note saying, "Better luck next time," locked the garage, and returned to my office. I called the insurance company to arrange for someone to pick up the jewels. It felt great knowing I prevented the thief from profiting, saved the insurance company a lot of money, and helped return the jewelry to the owners. Afterward, I saw Mary Farrell, one of our investigators, and invited her to lunch, hoping to get her perspective on the notations in Kathy's day planner. Over pastrami sandwiches, I explained the numbered days leading up to the 20th. Mary thought for a moment, then smiled and said the numbers likely tracked Kathy's menstrual cycle, with the 20th being her most fertile day. I was stunned. The idea had never crossed my mind. Kathy wasn't supposed to stop birth control until February, so why would she track her cycle now? Could she be doing it for someone else? The thought left me uneasy. I knew from experience not to jump to conclusions without all the facts, so I told myself to be patient. By 5 p.m., I wrapped up my work, feeling good about closing 3 cases. and getting some insight into Kathy's planner. I headed home, planning to take Kathy to her party that evening and hoping it would ease some of her stress. I got home by 5:30 p.m., parking in the driveway, knowing we'd be leaving soon. I walked down to get the mail and headed toward the front door. I hadn't checked the garage, so I didn't know if Kathy was home. As I was about to unlock the door, I noticed the hall light on. Looking through the small window, I saw Kathy coming down the stairs, completely unclothed, holding a towel and a can of shaving cream. I stepped back from the window, not wanting to scare her. She walked into the living room and stood near a chair, looking like she'd forgotten why she was there. I couldn't take my eyes off her. She looked stunning, but I realized I had to move before she noticed me. I decided to go through the garage so she'd hear me coming. I reluctantly pulled myself away, got in my car, and opened the garage door. After parking and letting the door close, I walked into the house and called out, "Kathy, I'm home." I thought I heard a door close upstairs. When I reached our bedroom, I called again. Kathy responded, "You're home early." "I'm getting ready in the bathroom." "Why don't you use the guest bathroom?" she suggested. Suspicious, I ignored her and opened the door. Kathy was sitting on the bathtub, trying to cover herself as she prepared to shave. "It was supposed to be a surprise," she said, forcing a smile. "For who?" I asked sharply. "For you," she quickly replied. "I thought it would surprise you after the party." I pressed her, saying, "I never mentioned wanting you to shave. Where'd you get that idea?" Kathy stammered, saying she thought it would be something different, that many women were doing it, and she thought I might like it. "We should have talked about it first," I said, irritated. She softly replied, "It's my body, and if I want to shave, I can. If we don't like it, it'll grow back." Though she had a point, I wasn't ready to let it go. "Don't shave it now," I said firmly. "We'll discuss it later, and if you really want to, you can do it tomorrow." Kathy's expression wasn't just angry. It was also fearful, which confused me. I understood her frustration, but couldn't figure out the fear. "I'm ready to do it now, so why should I wait?" she said defiantly. "Because your husband is asking you to wait," I replied, meeting her gaze. "I don't like bald kitties. Why does this need to happen now?" "It's my hair, and I'll shave it if I want to," she shot back, her frustration growing. "Go ahead then, but if you do, you're going to the party alone," I said coldly. Kathy was shocked. "What? Why are you being so unfair? It's just something I want to do." "I don't think you're being honest about why you want to shave," I said firmly. "You know I like your hair, so you weren't thinking of me. If you can't tell me the truth, we won't talk about it anymore. Shave it and go alone, or leave it, and we'll go together. It's your choice." Kathy gave me a sullen look, put the razor down, and got in the shower. Afterward, I showered too, then lounged in my bathrobe while she got ready in silence. I could tell she was angry, and I didn't want to provoke her further, so I watched her quietly. As she dressed, slipping into black thigh-high stockings and a cocktail dress, I couldn't help but notice how sexy she looked. But I wondered if she was dressing for me, or for someone else. At 7:30, I asked if she was ready to go. "Yes," she replied coldly. "You look really hot," I said, trying to lighten the mood. "You're going to melt someone's heart tonight." "Yours, I hope," she said, over her shoulder as she walked out, leaving me wondering if she meant to melt my heart or break it. During the drive, we were silent for the first 15 minutes before Kathy apologized. "I'm sorry about the shaving thing. I was just nervous about tonight and snapped." "No problem," I said. "Let's focus on having fun tonight." The party was at the company's offices. Shortly after we arrived, Hanson came over, pulled Kathy aside, and started talking to her. I watched closely, trying to read their interaction. It seemed tense at first, but then Hanson smiled, and Kathy reluctantly nodded. When she returned, I asked, "What did he want?" "The national pharmaceutical deal is closing tonight. I have a meeting at 10 o'clock with Jack and Mr. Bartlett. If it goes well, we'll get the contract." "So, you'll get your promotion?" I asked, trying to sound enthusiastic. "Yes, if everything works out," she said, but without much excitement. Kathy didn't seem as happy as she should have been. I tried testing her mood further. Then we can start trying for a baby? Yes, we can start our family, she replied flatly. I wanted to shake her and ask, what's going on? I was beginning to sense something deeper, and I knew I had to figure out how to handle it. As we entered the party, Kathy slipped her arm through mine and leaned in close. The room was nicely decorated, with tables around the edges, a band playing, a dance floor, and a buffet with an open bar. I scanned the room, recognizing most of the faces. It didn't take long to spot him. A man by the bar, around 35, 6 feet tall, fit, in a dark blue Armani suit. I pointed him out to Kathy. Who's that guy by the bar? I asked. I don't know, she replied, too casually, her body language stiff. I could tell she wasn't being truthful. Let's go get a drink, I suggested. I need to say hi to my coworkers. Why don't you get us drinks? She said, avoiding eye contact. I went to the bar, ordered her a red wine, and got myself a beer. Then I turned to the man in the suit. Mr. Benson, how are you tonight? I asked. He looked surprised. How do you know me? It's my job, I said. I need to take this wine to my wife, but I'd like to talk to you afterward. He seemed uneasy, but agreed. I handed Kathy her drink and told her I'd be back after circulating the room. She looked worried, but didn't stop me. Once she wasn't watching, I returned to Benson. I work in security for DCNH, I lied. Just making sure everything goes smoothly. Hansen has some fun planned, right? That's what I hear, Benson smirked. Just waiting for things to kick off. Around 10 o'clock, I asked, watching his reaction. You seem to know a lot, he said, growing nervous. Like I said, it's my job. I take it you like brunettes? I added with a sleazy smile. Love brunettes, he replied, relaxing. Especially with long hair? I pushed further. Exactly, he grinned. Like Mrs. Alpin, right? Just like her, I said, feeling sick as he laughed. I held back my anger. You probably like them with no hair down there, huh? Bald is nice, he laughed again. That was enough. I got what I needed. I've got to check around. If you need anything, find me, I said, walking away, muttering under my breath. When I returned to the other side of the room, a man had asked Kathy to dance. She politely declined and quickly pulled me onto the dance floor. As we danced, I kept an eye on Benson, making sure he didn't realize I was Kathy's husband. It was 9:30, and my stomach was in knots as I pieced together the final parts of the puzzle. As the song ended, I headed back to our table, but Kathy pulled me back onto the dance floor as the band started playing a slow song. She held me tighter than usual, almost uncomfortably so. I noticed Benson watching us, looking uneasy. I smiled and gave him a thumbs up, then tried to ignore him. I wondered if dancing with Kathy made him suspicious about who I really was, but by that point, I didn't care. After the dance, we returned to the table. As I sat down, Greg Bartlett approached, handed Kathy a small package, and whispered something to her before leaving. Kathy hid the package behind her back and told me she was going to the restroom. I looked at her and felt a wave of sickness. Don't do it, I said firmly. Don't do what? She asked, pretending not to understand. You know what I mean, I replied, grabbing her arm and locking eyes with her. I'm not stupid. Stop it now. Kathy pulled away, insisting she was just going to the bathroom, and walked off without looking back. While she was gone, I pieced together everything I had observed. It started when Kathy began calling Hansen Jack, then her sudden depression and insistence that the national pharmaceutical deal was in jeopardy because of her, though she claimed she had done nothing wrong. The numerous meetings with Bartlett, Hansen, and the customer, along with her tracking of her menstrual cycle, didn't add up, especially since she was still on birth control. And the argument about shaving, that wasn't for me. What Kathy didn't know was that earlier, I had seen her unclothed in the living room, with Hansen's hand on her. I watched as he touched her and kissed her. I didn't confront them immediately. Instead, I opened the garage door, giving them time to stop and for Hansen to slip out. I suspected Benson had demanded Kathy shave for him as part of the deal, with Hansen and Bartlett complicit in the whole thing. I figured the package Bartlett handed her contained shaving cream and a razor, and she was now in the restroom preparing for Benson. It was 9:45, and Kathy hadn't returned. I was tense and running out of time. Without a clear plan, I decided to find Kathy and drag her out of the building. Consequences be damned. As I headed for the door, the band announced a break, and an idea hit me. I noticed Benson, Bartlett, and Hansen standing together by the bar, the perfect audience. I walked over to the band and asked the lead singer, "Can you leave your mic on? I'd like to make a few announcements." "Sure," he said, handing me the wireless mic. "It's ready to go." I paced for a moment, gathering my thoughts, then turned on the microphone. "Can I have everyone's attention, please?" I called out. The room slowly quieted, and I noticed Kathy coming back from the restroom. Benson, Bartlett, and Hansen were all watching me, curious. "Thanks," I continued. "I just wanted to take a moment on this special occasion to share some news about me and my wonderful wife, Kathy." I glanced at Kathy, who was now walking toward me, looking fearful. "First, some great news. Kathy and I are going to have a baby," I announced. The crowd applauded, and Kathy covered her face, probably appearing embarrassed to those who didn't know the truth. Hansen looked furious, Bartlett confused, and Benson unreadable. And more good news, Kathy is getting a promotion tonight for her work on the national pharmaceutical deal. I understand she's meeting upstairs with Mr. Bartlett, Mr. Hansen, and Mr. Benson to sign the contract. Isn't that exciting? More applause followed, but Kathy quietly pleaded, "Oh, God, please stop." She sat down on the floor, visibly shaken. I pressed on, saying, "When I got home tonight, I found my wife in the bathroom getting ready to shave. And I don't mean her legs." There was awkward laughter, but the room was mostly silent now. Kathy was lying on the floor, crying, and people were watching in shock. Benson was gone, but Hansen's face was red with rage, and Bartlett was approaching me, clearly wanting to stop me. I continued. Kathy was shaving because she was supposed to be a gift for Mr. Benson tonight. He wanted her hairless. The crowd was stunned. Bartlett reached for the microphone, but I pulled it away, warning him, "Try that again, and I'll knock you out." I turned the mic back on. "One last thing for Bartlett and Hansen. I'll be suing this company for what you did to my marriage. I'm confident I'll win, and part of the settlement will be your firings. Good night, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your party." The room fell silent as I set the mic down and walked over to Kathy, who was still on the floor, tears streaming down her face. "Kathy," I whispered. She looked up at me. "Fred, I'm so—" "Kathy, don't say anything," I interrupted. "Do you think you'll still get that promotion now?" I stood up and looked around the room. People were staring, but when I glanced back, they quickly looked away. I gave Kathy one last look and left. As I was crossing the lobby to leave, Hansen blocked my path. "Do you know what you've done?" he demanded. "Yes," I said. "I screwed you in DCNH before you could finish screwing my wife. I hope it cost you millions, not just a few $100,000. "You'll pay for this," Hansen snapped. "I think you will," I replied. "I'll be talking to the SEC about your business practices." As I turned to leave, Hansen grabbed my arm. "I'm not done with you," he said. I brushed him off. "Touch me again, and you won't be walking out of here," I warned. I heard him muttering as I left. When I got home, I grabbed a bottle of scotch and started drinking. As I poured my second glass, I noticed something blue in a potted plant. It was the blue plastic case that had fallen out of the wastebasket earlier in the week. Inside, it was full, nothing missing. I put it on the table and kept drinking until I passed out on the sofa. I woke up around 9 a.m. Saturday with a pounding headache and a terrible taste in my mouth. After some coffee and breakfast, I showered. There was no sign of Kathy, and I didn't expect her to come home. She was probably either afraid to face me or angry that I had ruined things for her at DCNH. I wasn't sure if I cared. I sat on the sofa, thinking about what to do next. It hurt to realize how much I had loved Kathy and how she could betray us like this. I doubted I could ever forgive her, but I knew I needed to give her a chance to explain if she wanted it. However, I wouldn't chase her for an explanation. If she didn't feel the need to explain, I didn't need to hear it. I wondered where she spent the night and felt guilty for leaving her at the party. I should have brought her home, but at the time, I was too hurt and angry to care. At 11 o'clock, the phone rang. I assumed it was Kathy and debated answering, but I picked up on the sixth ring. "Mr. Alpin?" a voice asked. "Yes," I replied. "This is Special Agent Mark Walker with the FBI. Is your wife with you?" "No, she's not," I said, surprised the FBI wanted to talk to her. "Actually, I need to speak with you," he said. "Me? What about?" I asked, confused. "I'd prefer to discuss it in person. Can you come to my office this afternoon?" I agreed and received directions to meet him at 2 p.m. After the call, I wondered what the FBI wanted with me. It might have something to do with one of my recent cases, but I couldn't figure out why he wouldn't explain over the phone. Over the years, I've had plenty of interactions with law enforcement for work, and it never bothered me. But this FBI meeting had me uneasy. At 1 o'clock, I dressed in jeans and a sweater, drove into town, and parked across from the FBI offices in downtown Indianapolis. I gave my name to the receptionist, telling her I was there to see Special Agent Walker. "Have a seat," she said. Within 2 minutes, Walker came out to greet me. Unlike the expensive suit he wore the night before, today he was in blue Dockers and a casual shirt. "Mr. Alpin, thanks for coming," he said. "Follow me." We entered a conference room, and he offered me a cup of coffee. After pouring 2 cups, he sat down across from me. "Should I call you Special Agent Walker or Mr. Benson?" I asked. "Mark is fine," he replied. "And may I call you Fred?" "Fred's fine," I agreed. "You must be confused right now," Mark said. "Yes, but I'm starting to piece it together. You were undercover as Mr. Benson, right?" "That's right," he confirmed. "I trust you'll keep what we discuss here confidential." "I understand confidentiality," I said, still unsure of his role. "I'm hoping you'll explain how my wife got caught up in all of this." "I'll tell you what I can without jeopardizing our investigation," Mark said. "But I get that you're angry. This situation has probably strained your marriage." I nodded, frustrated. "This mess has likely ended it." "Things might not be as bad as you think," Mark continued. "Let me fill you in." He explained that earlier in the year, the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, contacted the FBI after receiving disturbing information about DC&H's business practices. "We began investigating and decided undercover work was necessary," he said. He paced as he spoke. "National Pharmaceutical was in talks with DC&H about a merger. Mr. Benson, the president of National, raised concerns about DC&H's tactics. Since no one at DC&H had met Benson in person, I took on his identity and began negotiating with them." "So you pretended to be Benson?" I asked. "Exactly," Mark confirmed. "I led Hansen and Bartlett to believe I was interested but hesitant. I made them think I might back out, which made them desperate." "But why involve my wife?" I asked, feeling a growing knot in my stomach. "That's not exactly what happened," Mark explained. "When I first met with Bartlett and Hansen at DC&H, I was introduced to your wife. I told Hansen I wanted to talk to her about the finances of the company they wanted to merge with." "Why?" I asked, bracing myself. "Because your wife was the whistleblower. She contacted the SEC with concerns about DC&H's unethical practices." I was stunned. Kathy blew the whistle? "Yes, but she didn't know I was FBI," Mark said. "Her information implicated not just Bartlett and Hansen, but higher-ups, including the company's president. I couldn't fully trust her, though." "So, she didn't know you were playing Benson?" I asked, trying to make sense of it. "Was she actually going to sleep with you at the party?" "I don't think so," Mark replied, shaking his head. "But I can't be sure." When I hinted at backing out of the deal, Hansen asked what it would take to seal the contract. That's when he made the suggestion. My fists clenched. He offered my wife? Mark nodded. He said, I noticed you think Kathy Alpin is pretty attractive. How'd you like to get in on that? I was shocked. I expected him to offer a bribe, but instead, he offered your wife. I played along to see how far they'd go. I told him I might be interested, but didn't commit. That son of a witch, I muttered, anger rising. Exactly, Mark said. The more Hansen talked, the more excited he got. I felt like he wanted me to accept for reasons beyond closing the deal. He even suggested I meet your wife at the company Christmas party. I started to feel nauseous. So, were you going to go through with it? No, Mark quickly replied. I had no intention of sleeping with your wife. First, it would have been unethical. Second, I suspected there'd be cameras and mics in the room. This wasn't just a sexual favor to get me to sign. They planned to use it to blackmail me. How are you planning to get out of it? I asked, genuinely curious. I was going to back out at the last second, Mark explained. I'd say the timing wasn't right and suggest Mrs. Alpin meet me in my hotel room later. Once alone, I'd reveal who I really was and bring her in for questioning. The plan was to arrest Bartlett and Hansen today. We thought we had enough evidence. I sat back feeling a mix of relief and anger. But I ruined everything with my little speech, didn't I? Actually, Mark said, smiling slightly, you didn't. You saved me from the meeting with Hansen last night. I left with my cover intact and kept investigating. This morning, Hansen offered me a large cash bribe to sign the contract. I told him I'd meet him Monday morning. When he hands over the money, we'll arrest him, and DCNH's operations will be shut down as we investigate every deal from the past 3 years. I shook my head, still processing it all. I still don't know where Kathy fits into this. Your wife was trying to do the right thing by blowing the whistle on the company, Mark said. But as for her role in the offer, I think Hansen was coercing her. He might have been blackmailing her. Was a rubber ever mentioned? I asked, feeling another wave of nausea. Yes, Mark replied. Hansen said your wife insisted I use one. He joked, we wouldn't want to get her pregnant, would we? I sighed and leaned back in my chair. I need to find Kathy. I need to hear her side of this. She wasn't entirely innocent, but there were mitigating factors. That's all I can tell you for now, Mark said. Any more questions? Not at the moment. Good. Just remember, don't talk about the investigation yet. I'd suggest not telling your wife anything until we indict Bartlett and Hansen, which should be in a few days. We'll want to question her then. I agreed to keep quiet about the investigation. Mark said he'd call when I could talk to Kathy about the FBI sting. He also mentioned they'll likely want your testimony too. We shook hands and I left the building. When I got home, there was a message from Kathy asking me to call. I dialed the number she left, and a woman answered. Who's calling? She asked. Tell her it's her husband, I said. Kathy sounded nervous when she picked up. Where have you been? She asked. I've been calling all day. Not all day, I said. I was home until 1 o'clock. Oh, I guess I started calling around then. I wasn't going to make it easy for her. She needed to show she was ready to talk, so I stayed silent. Fred, can I come home? She asked. This is where you live, isn't it? You should be here now. I'll be there in an hour. Okay, I said, and hung up. It was already 5 o'clock. I decided to have dinner ready when she arrived so we could talk afterward. I started cooking, then went upstairs to prepare for the conversation I knew was coming. When I came back down, I grabbed the blue case from the coffee table and put it in my pocket. I made spaghetti and meatballs with a salad and opened a bottle of Chianti. Kathy walked in at 6:05 and dinner was ready. When she saw the dinner and wine, some of the stress seemed to leave her face. She realized things might not be as bad as she feared. At first, we didn't speak. We sat down to eat, and I poured the wine. After a few minutes of painful silence, I asked, Where did you stay last night? One of my friends took me home after you left. I couldn't resist a jab. Oh, you didn't stay for the rest of the party? You pretty much ended the party with your speech, she said. I guess I owe some people an apology for that. But not you. and definitely not Bartlett or Hansen. You're right. I owe you the apology, she said. She was about to continue, but I stopped her. We'll talk after dinner, I said, and we both fell silent again. There wasn't much else to say. After dinner, Kathy started loading the dishwasher, but I stopped her. You can clean up later. We need to talk now, I said. We moved to the family room and sat facing each other. Do you want to tell me everything, or should I start asking questions? Either way, I expect the truth, I said. I'll tell you everything, she said. I'm sure you know when it started. The day after your Christmas party, Jack called me. He said a big deal with National Pharmaceutical was in trouble, and Mr. Benson wouldn't sign unless I slept with him. I was furious. I couldn't believe Jack would ask me to do something like that. But he said the deal was important to the company and that I'd be rewarded handsomely if I agreed. Lots of money and a promotion. I didn't want to do it, but Jack kept pressuring me, saying many people were counting on me. I told them I needed to think about it. I was so stressed and confused that I couldn't think straight. When you came home, I knew I couldn't go through with it. Jack and Mr. Bartlett kept after me all day Monday, trying to get me to agree. Mr. Hansen said if the deal fell through, it would be my fault, and I'd be fired. They also threatened to fire me if I told anyone. I tried to tell you as much as I could, but I knew if you found out the full story, you'd do something crazy, and I'd lose my job. On Tuesday, I told them I wouldn't do it. They told me to reconsider. Then Mr. Hansen said the company was missing over $100,000. And if there were an audit, it would look like I'd been embezzling for years. Jack told me I'd go to jail unless I did what they wanted. He said if I cooperated, I'd get the money and the promotion. But if not, there'd be an audit, and I'd be charged with embezzlement. In the end, I had no choice but to agree. Jack and Mr. Bartlett talked to me daily, making sure I didn't back out. They kept saying I was doing the right thing, and that you'd understand if you knew how important the deal was, Kathy continued. I'd been quiet up to this point, but now I was furious. You can't seriously think I'd have been okay with this. You should have told me everything. I would have found a way out for you. I know, Kathy said, her voice shaking. Once I decided to go through with it, I felt a bit better, but I was so guilty about what I was doing to you. You have to understand. I was terrified of going to jail. I had to risk it. And then, I asked, my patience wearing thin. On a Friday, Jack called me into his office. He said Mr. Benson wanted me to shave all my pubic hair before the party. I told him I couldn't do that, but he said it would be a deal breaker if I didn't. Mr. Benson would back out of the deal. Jack told me to shave before the party and not let you notice until later. If you got mad, I was just supposed to say sorry and that I'd let it grow back. The problem was, you came home earlier than expected and caught me getting ready to shave. So, was I right? Did you end up shaving in the ladies' room at the party? I asked, narrowing my eyes. Kathy looked down at her hands. Yes, she whispered. Mr. Bartlett sent someone to the store for a razor and shaving cream, and I shaved in the ladies' room. When I came back to the party, I saw you with the microphone, trying to get everyone's attention. I was terrified. I had no idea what you were going to do, and I didn't know how to stop you. When you said I was pregnant, I couldn't believe it. I didn't say you were pregnant, I corrected her. I said we were going to have a baby. You weren't pregnant yet, but that was our plan, wasn't it? Well, yes, she stammered. But what? I demanded. Are we, or aren't we going to start a family? Yes, we are, she said softly. I'll stop taking my birth control pills tomorrow, and then we can start. One more question, I said, holding back a flood of emotions. Did you tell Benson he had to use a rubber? Jack said he'd make sure Benson used one, she replied. I'm glad he did because I wasn't thinking straight with all the stress. Anyway, your speech basically ended my career at DCNH and probably eliminated the deal with National Pharmaceutical, she added bitterly. So let me get this straight. Bartlett and Hansen blackmailed you into agreeing to sleep with Benson to close a deal. They also insisted you fulfill his demand to shave, and I ruined everything by catching you in the act. Then, Even after I told you not to do it, you shaved anyway. And in the end, the only reason you didn't sleep with Benson was because I ruined it with my speech. Does that about sum it up? Yes, she whispered. But I don't blame you. I understand why you did it. Oh, good, I said sarcastically. So, you forgive me for trying to stop my wife from sleeping with another man? That's not what I meant, Kathy said quickly. I know you had every right to react the way you did, and I have no right to be upset. I'm upset with myself. I should have told you everything from the start. Do you think you can ever forgive me? She asked, her voice breaking. That depends, I said, feeling the weight of everything. Is that everything? Have you told me everything I need to know? Yes, I've told you everything, she said, tears filling her eyes. I love you, and I can't stand the thought of losing you because of this mess I got into. Well, things don't look as bad as they did at first, I said, noticing a faint smile forming on her face. But I have a few more questions before we can move past this, okay? What questions? She asked, her voice hopeful. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the blue case, and tossed it on the coffee table. I found this in the trash last week, and it's full. You threw away all your birth control pills, but you didn't tell me, and you made me believe you were still taking them. Just 5 minutes ago, you said you'd stop taking them tomorrow. Can you explain that? Kathy looked like I'd slapped her. She opened and closed her mouth several times before finally speaking, but I knew she was lying. You're right. I stopped taking my pills, she admitted. I was planning to surprise you by getting pregnant. I know how much you wanted to start a family, so I thought it would be a nice surprise. That would have only worked if we had been having sex, I said coldly. But the last time we did was the day before you stopped taking them. I was just so upset about what Mr. Bartlett and Jack wanted me to do that I wasn't in the mood for sex, Kathy replied quickly. Were you aware that last night was the most fertile night of your cycle? I asked, catching her off guard. No, I didn't realize that, she stammered. I had too many other things on my mind. It's strange, I continued, that you planned to sleep with Benson last night, in the middle of your cycle, and didn't insist on a rubber. But Jack did. What are you implying? She asked, panic rising in her voice. That I knew I was fertile and was willing to risk getting pregnant? I would never do that. I could tell Kathy was shaken, and I was tired of the game. It was time to end it. One more question, Kathy, I said, looking straight at her. How long have you been sleeping with Hanson? Her face went pale, and all she could say was, What? No more lies, I said firmly. I know you've been tracking your menstrual cycle and marked last night as the day in your planner. I know Hanson told Benson to use a rubber, and since I wasn't sleeping with you, that leaves Hanson. He wanted to get you pregnant, didn't he? Kathy's tears started falling, and she didn't respond. It wasn't Benson who wanted you shaved. It was Hanson, I said coldly. And you did it for him, even though I told you not to. That shows me he has more influence over you than I do. I let the words sink in. Last night, when I came home, I stood at the front door and saw you unclothed in the living room. I watched as Hanson ran his hands down your back and kissed your stomach, like a man kisses the belly of the woman carrying his baby, or about to carry it. Did you really think I was dumb enough to believe it was mine? Or were you planning to leave me all alone? Kathy's sobs grew louder as I stood up and left the room. When I came back to the kitchen with my suitcase, she looked at me in shock. No! Please don't leave me, she cried, rushing toward me. I love you. I don't love Jack. He blackmailed me. I had no choice but to do what he asked. Why didn't you just keep taking your birth control pills and lie to Jack? I asked bitterly. You had no problem lying to me. I think I'd believe anything you told that rat over what you've told me lately. Oh, by the way, I added as I reached the door. Last night, when I was watching you with Hanson, I heard you say, I love you to him. So, where does that leave me? I don't love him. If I'm pregnant, I'll have infanticide. I love you. Please, you have to believe me, she begged. No, I don't, I said coldly. And as for the baby, don't feticide it for my sake. Kathy collapsed on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. As I glanced back from the garage door, she looked just as she had the night before at the party, broken. I no longer felt any love for her, only disgust. I hated leaving the house we had worked so hard to build, but it didn't hold any fond memories. Fortunately, we hadn't been there long enough to make any. It's been over 2 years since I walked out on Kathy. After I left, I found a furnished apartment and tried to start over. That's when the nightmares began. I wasn't happy with my job anymore, so I quit and moved to California. After settling in, I started my own insurance investigation company. I called Bill Ripley and asked if he wanted to partner with me. 2 months later, he joined. When Bill arrived, he told me Mary Farrow, a mutual acquaintance, had heard we were starting our own business and asked if we had a job for her. Mary moved out here 14 months ago, and we started dating 2 months later. After 3 months, we moved in together. I was surprised at how quickly I could love again. I wasn't in a hurry to get married, but I liked having someone I cared about to share my life with. Through a few contacts, including Special Agent Mark Walker, I've kept tabs on people back in Indianapolis. It turns out Kathy blew the whistle on the company president and CEO, following Jack Hansen's instructions. Hansen hoped to get them fired for their shady deals, so he could take over as president of DCNH. Apparently, Kathy wasn't lying when she said she didn't love him. She was playing him, knowing he was in love with her. She figured if Hansen got what he wanted, she'd get whatever she wanted. Hansen and his wife didn't have kids, which he blamed on her. After I left, he tried for over a month to get Kathy pregnant. He wasn't successful with her either. He was sterile. His wife found out about the affair and divorced him. A month later, Hansen was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for his actions at DCNH. Bartlett also got jail time. He's serving 2 years in a minimum security facility. Kathy was fired from DCNH. The company was reorganized and eventually bought out by a larger consulting firm. The last I heard, Kathy was teaching bookkeeping at a community college near Columbus, Ohio. I try not to think about her. The wounds are still too fresh to remember any good times we had. I don't miss her, which is good, because Mary more than fills the void Kathy left in my life. That's why I married her. Now, here I sit, looking down at Mary and wondering if I should wake her up. Not to tell her I had the dream again, but to tell her I love her. Last night, she told me, "Whenever you decide you want a baby, just let me know. But make sure you order early. It takes 9 months for delivery," she added with a laugh. I'm thinking of placing that order tomorrow. By the way, in case you were wondering, yes, DCNH stands for Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe.